Mr. Tejas, you ready?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Good morning. I'd like to call this December 9th, 2015 meeting of the Camino Real Regional Mobility Authority Board to order at, I believe it's 9:03 a.m. Mr. Tejas, do we have anyone signed up for public comment today?
No, sir, not this morning.
Okay, we'll go to the next item. Item 3 is adoption of the minutes for the CRRMA board meeting of October 22nd, 2015. If anyone has had an opportunity or the board members had an opportunity to review them. We have a motion and a second. All in favor? Aye. Minutes are approved. Item 4. Before we get into item 4, I went too fast this morning. I apologize. We have 2 brand spanking new members of our board after a long delay in the machinations of getting approved and bonding and everything else. We're real excited about the addition of our 2 board members. I would like to welcome David Niemer and Joe Fernandez to the Camino Real Mobility Authority Board. We're excited to work with them. They bring a wealth of experience that's going to help us as we push forward and complete projects and hopefully propose some projects that are going to help mobility in our community. I would like to allow them to say a few words if they'd like. David, would you like to go first? Would you like to say anything?
I have prepared remarks here. No, I'm glad to be here. I think it's an important effort, and I'm very excited about some of the opportunities that the board's involved with. So I'm glad to be here.
Thank you, Joe.
Well, personally, I just welcome the opportunity to have been nominated into the board, and I really appreciate it, and I look forward to learning a lot and working with the organization.
We're glad that you're here, both of you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, let's proceed. Item 4, presentation, discussion, and action on a request by State Representative Pickett for the Camino Real Regional Mobility Authority to meet with the Texas Department of Transportation to discuss the feasibility of removing tolls from El Paso and the associated implications on the CRRMA. Representative Pickett, welcome. We also have another guest this morning, Mayor Leeser. Welcome to our meeting. We're honored that you are here this morning. Thank you for attending.
Good morning.
Good morning, Mr. Pickett.
This is pretty cool. This has got a pull-out drawer here. I can type and hit the internet at the same time. If I'd have known that, I would have pulled up all kinds of stuff on your screen. For the record, my name is Joe Pickett. Could I take a few minutes, Mr. Chairman, and kind of go back to some history, especially with a couple of new board members? I know they've been just kind of thrown in the mix, and I want to go back a few years and just talk about why I'm here and the proposal that bring to the board.
Whatever time you need, Representative Pickett.
It won't be that long. There's a lot of things that everything that I say is pretty much on the record. You can go Google and look up all kinds of things, and if you read it all, it makes sense. I'd like to think that I try to give 2, sometimes 3 sides to different arguments and different perspectives. We have regional mobility authorities because the state of Texas, the legislature in particular, was not doing what I feel we should have originally done. We were starting to run out of cash, and in Texas, we used to borrow money for major public projects. We did it for prisons, we did it for parks, we did it for all of our state facilities. We did not let the Texas Department of Transportation borrow any money. They were the only entity that couldn't bond. We came across a period of time, basically around 2003, was the first time we took a real dip. We were about $10 billion short that particular year. And I was on appropriations. Actually, I spent more time on appropriations than doing transportation. But I was so interested in it, and I did all of the dollars and stuff for the agency. There are some wild proposals out there, and frankly, to this day, I can't even tell you where all of them came from. But there was a House Bill 3588, and it was an omnibus bill. And this omnibus bill created regional mobility authorities. It created driver's responsibility program. It had all kinds of stuff. It was one of those bills where enough things were put into it, the crafters were just looking for a way to pass the entire bill. Not unlike what we hear happens in Congress a lot of times now. We don't do that very often in the state legislature. So there are people that supported the bill because hospitals pushed them to vote for it because they wanted funding for trauma care. But we had transportation tools being put in that. So where a member voted for it and then went home and said, I supported trauma funding for your hospital, but what about this RMA stuff and tolls? And, well, I really don't support that kind of stuff. But it was in the bill that you voted on. Well, since then, things have changed. In 2013, and in this last session, I've been the House sponsor of the 2 largest initiatives to get back to spending cash as you go in the state of Texas. We didn't have the money. So what we did, though, in the legislature was we're not going to give you the cash, but we'll give you bonding authority. So we started to let TxDOT borrow money. There are 3 sources of those funds totally. We didn't do it all at once. They came over different periods of time. The first one was the Mobility Fund, and that's a revolving fund. And that one's based on revenues coming into the state of Texas. And TxDOT asks the comptroller how much money is coming in. The comptroller looks at the revenues and says, there's X amount of revenues. Okay, we want to bond against those revenues. And everybody would say, there's enough revenue, go ahead and do it, issue bonds. And as long as there was 110% revenue coming in, it was a moving number. TxDOT issued $1.7 billion in bonds. And then a year passes and TxDOT would ask the comptroller how much revenue is coming in. Plenty of revenue to continue paying on the $1.7 billion. In fact, there's a little bit more revenue now, and there's a little bit of a spread. In fact, there's about $400 million in capacity if you want to go out and borrow some more money. So TxDOT would borrow $400 million more, bump it up to $2.1 billion total now, different issuances. And this kept going and kept going and kept going. And during that time, myself and Senator Ogden passed the original Prop 14 initiative. And we've basically utilized all that capacity. Since then, we've passed another proposition, and we're at the capacity on that one. So that leaves the original one that's a revolving fund. Well, this last session, I passed a bill in the House, my Senate sponsor, Robert Nichols. We have cut off the ability on the Mobility Fund to be a revolving fund because the state of Texas overall has decided we need to curb our borrowing. So now we have 3 sources of bond funding. One of them that was a revolving fund has been shut off at this time. It was done legislatively, not through the Constitution. We were able to do it, so it's possible that a future legislature could turn it back on. The other 2, one of them can be expanded by the legislature, but the current position is no more. Now, TxDOT is still issuing bonds. We gave them the authority through this current biennium. So a little bit of the history. So when TxDOT was going around the state of Texas trying to help communities with their projects is where I believe they got a little heavy-handed. And there was an initiative, and I'm not shy about it at all. I'll tell it like it is. TxDOT came into our community like they did all over the state of Texas and said, you will create toll projects or we will cut your funds. We will cut your funds. Cut them. TxDOT also had a policy, a minute order in place that required every new capacity project in the state of Texas to be analyzed as a toll first. Every project. So it didn't matter where it was, if it was in Lubbock, Texas, Amarillo, Beaumont, Austin, or El Paso. If you're adding a new capacity, if you're adding a lane, creating a road that wasn't there, it was required to at least be analyzed as a toll project. And TxDOT kept pushing, kept pushing, kept pushing. They came into our community. TxDOT originally, one of the proposals wanted to toll what we now call Spur 601. And we heard from the Department of Defense, if that had happened, we would not have had the $5 billion expansion that you now see over there. We fought TxDOT. No, we don't want to toll that one. Okay, we're going to toll Loop 375 from Interstate 10 going north to Montana as we're doing that new expansion several years ago. No, That's a huge growth area, and that corridor now is a transportation reinvestment zone where the city of El Paso, to give them credit, have looked to the future and said, we're going to take the new growth in the tax base, not increase taxes, but because of that improvement. If any of you have driven that in the last few years, drive it in the last couple of weeks. There is a pad being poured almost every day. And the tax base is a certain amount, but when you're adding value to that and you assess a higher value, not higher taxes, this was a way for the city to capture that, put it aside, and dedicate it to those improvements. And because that's been so successful, we actually turned down a part of a loan that we had from TxDOT. So going back to the period of the heavy-handed tactics and pushing and pushing and pushing, it was so political at that time across the entire state of Texas. And again, Lubbock was required to have tolls. Amarillo, where are you going to toll in those places if you visited them? The second largest city in the state of Texas is San Antonio. San Antonio to this day does not have a toll. And 2 months ago, they successfully fought the toll that was being forced on their community like ours and went back to the commission and asked for it to be reconsidered and taken off of their plan as a toll. And that was done 2 months ago. There's two parts to that, and that's going to be about an $800 million project. So we go back several years, and what are we going to do in El Paso? We came up with a hybrid. We came up with a proposal. Border Highway, Cesar Chavez section, Zaragoza going west towards US 54. 2 lanes in each direction today. How about, and because of that particular area, we have right-of-way on the inside. We didn't need to go outside of that and disturb anybody's personal or business properties. We've got, obviously, the border on one side of it. So we've got right-of-way on the inside. Okay, how about this? Because all you want, TxDOT, is to show that we have a toll. It doesn't even have to be successful. You just want a toll. You want a selling point to go around the state of Texas and say everybody is tolling. TxDOT said, we'll give you the money. What? We're not even expecting the toll revenues to be used for bonds to be issued. So people who are listening to this for the first time, the state of Texas nor our community borrowed money using the tolls as a pledge. Now, the state of Texas does have borrowed money in general, and Texas did give us money, some of it which came from either Prop 12 or Prop 14. But that's money that the entire state of Texas had the ability to bond. Nevertheless, the monies were just sent to El Paso, build a road. Here were the conditions that we put on, and basically we were able to, at that time, negotiate with the executive director of TxDOT, so it got outside of the commission. Because the commission is the one that just says, you will, you will, you will. But the executive director had the ability to actually negotiate the details. So what we got down to was, all right, we'll add a managed lane, and managed lane is just, another term for a toll on the inside, as long as we reconstruct totally the 2 existing non-tolled lanes there now. So by the end of the project, we will have 3 lanes in each direction, brand spanking new, that have a great shelf life, maybe 20, 30 years without any major maintenance being done. And so we only have the tolls on the inside. During the negotiation, El Paso made history in a small circle, in a small world, people watching tolls. This was the only area we also negotiated that if this does not make money in 15 years, it has to revert to a non-tolled road anyway. Well, that sounds like a major win. Well, it was a major win as far as the propaganda. Your board, however, could keep that perpetuating or cut it short. You can raise the tolls today on Cesar Chavez. You could start making more of a profit sooner. But we were just looking at that initial process going out, trying to send a message that sometime in the future, these kind of negotiations and these heavy-handed tactics should not be there. So we opened the door even back then during that time. Now, what also has happened since then and I'm going to digress a little bit, is saying again in 2013, we passed the largest influx of cash ever in TxDOT's history. And then just a few weeks ago, we beat that by 3 times. And now we passed the second largest cash infusion in TxDOT's history. So something has changed since back in 2003 when we the legislature, let me go back to us, we're not putting in cash, but we said you can borrow money. And then we figured out that that credit card payment was going to be pretty hellacious to pay. And here's today's example that I've given the legislature. TxDOT's budget in round numbers is about $11 billion a year. TxDOT, right off the top, $1.1 billion, 10%, goes to pay our debt service on the bonds. So every dollar now that we save on debt is another dollar we can use for construction. And the legislature as a whole, the current leadership, the current governor, believes that we've got to stop borrowing money. We've got to start letting communities find better ways to make their own decisions. So that brings me back to the presentation today. TxDOT gave basically our community the money but said you have to put a toll on it. And those tolls, again, were for the future. We understand that the revenues are pledged for bonds, but maintenance is the largest expenditure that TxDOT has. Out of that $11 billion budget, TxDOT spends twice as much maintaining the system as it does providing new money to build the system. And most people don't know that. The chambers of commerce of the world, the city councils, the county commissioners' courts, they all want the new overpasses. They want the new road connections. They want the new, but we, the state of Texas, still spend more money on maintenance. Well, let's take care of that. Proposition 1 and Prop 7 is for the entire system. It can go for maintenance. The one thing it cannot go for, because this is what the leadership and the rest of the state of Texas has said, Prop 1 and Prop 7, the largest influx of cash in the history of Texas, cannot be used for toll roads. That ought to, again, tell our community and the rest of the state of Texas where we want to go in the future. We want to reduce tolls. This last session, I passed another initiative with Senator Nichols. TxDOT is required to inventory for the first time all the toll roads in the state of Texas, regardless of who operates them. NTTA, HECTRA, the tolls operated by the state, and TxDOT is required to bring the legislature next session a plan on how to reduce all of the state-operated tolls. Whether we can afford that or whether we can do that remains to be seen. And personally, I don't think we could do it in one fell swoop, but it's the first time since the heavy-handed tactics were going the other direction and saying, how can we pull back? San Antonio's community just pulled back. I'm suggesting here in El Paso, if we turn this back around, because of what has passed in the legislature, the leadership that's now currently in TxDOT and the state of Texas, that the citizens of El Paso don't deserve to be told. Take the toll off. We need to ask TxDOT, if we remove the toll, will you do a couple of things? Otherwise, it would be hard for you not to support it. One is, you told us that we, the RMA, the city of El Paso, is required to do the maintenance into the future. That's why we're collecting the toll. If we don't collect a toll, are you, the state of Texas, going to take over the maintenance of the road? That's the first thing that you, this board, if you support this, would put in your request of TxDOT. We will remove the toll, but you have to pick up the cost of the maintenance into perpetuity. It's as simple as that. The monies that can be generated, and Raymond Tejas is probably the best person the RMA could have. He really is. There's a lot of times where it sounds like I am offended by what the RMA does, and I've, since its inception, tried to give credit where credit is due. The first project that this RMA did was not a toll project. This first project was, going back now to Spur 601. It was the first project of its kind in the state of Texas. That was the first project. We had changed laws to allow a contractor just to make the state a proposal. The state wasn't out putting out bids. It was like, if you come across something that you think you can do, you can bond, bring it to us, we'll take a look at it, we may or may not approve it. This was the first one. And the state of Texas looked at a proposal brought to us by a private contractor and said, we like that. And then the state of Texas turned around and said, you know what? We'll let the Regional Mobility Authority in El Paso manage it. The direct connects on I-10 and 375. We thank you for your help on those. So there's lots of things that an RMA can do outside of tolls. There will be bills next session trying to do away with RMAs again. I have been a part of several pieces of legislation trying to give you all the help you need for those things that I feel are in the best interest of El Paso. The Regional Mobility Authority can now do some projects that they couldn't when the original law was passed, and I supported those. And in my current situation and position that I have in the legislature, and I'm hoping it doesn't change, I'm hoping Speaker Strauss gets back, I'm hoping I get back, and Speaker Strauss keeps me in that same position. This sounds a little bit maybe overbearing, but now I'm the dictator. I have full authority on whether a bill gets even heard that has to do with transportation. Not only do I chair transportation, I'm also chairing a select committee on transportation funding, as I did during last interim. So I'm going to have a lot of influence on this. What I'm asking is just in the timing. Why wouldn't we do this? Well, we are generating some money, but how much are you generating? To me, $100,000, $1 million is still a lot of money, and yet this initiative that I helped pass a few weeks ago is going to be $3 billion a year. And I don't throw those numbers out there lightly. And we can look at the money that this has raised since its inception, but how far is it going to be before you really have lots and lots of money that can use for lots of things? The collections themselves, and I think you may have been focused on just the toll portion of it itself. I asked TxDOT to do some traffic counts. We've done it twice, and we can do it some more for you if you'd like, so we can show you that there is a pattern there. And I'm going to round the numbers. I have these. These are real facts. Of the total amount of people that use that section of road, 100% is our percentile. 6% use the toll lane. 6%. So that means 94% of the driving public choose not to pay extra to be in that lane. And then it gets actually worse than that. And you're making money off the 6%. Don't get me wrong. I'll agree to, yes, you're making money off 6%. But if we really want to look at mobility and congestion, we've got 94% of the traveling public on 2 lanes when we could have 100% divided over 3 lanes. But we've got 94 on 2. And then that 6%, it breaks down to 3 hours out of a day is how much it's used. So we have a lane that only 6% of the driving public use and only 3 hours of a 24-hour day. So for 21 hours out of a day, 7 days a week, we have a road that goes unused. It's crazy. If this roadway had to stand alone as a toll, and we went out and tried to bond, there isn't anybody that would lend us money based on those numbers. It just doesn't work. There's no way. So I know that's a lot of numbers, a lot of stuff, but I think there's some background there. I think that people believe that I'm just trying to beat up on the RMA. I'm not. I'm not. I want the RMA to do those things that really are right, that help us. You have the ability to be, the financing tools that you have are something that cities and counties don't. You're able to keep these numbers off the city's books. The city of El Paso doesn't have to show that on theirs, even though you were created by the city. You're also an unusual regional mobility authority. All the others are created by county government. This one was created by city government by special statute. I will also tell you that this is the only RMA in the state of Texas that can be rolled back and be dissolved and become a part of city government is something that I put in statute, and I'm not suggesting that. I would like the relationship and have the expertise so that a city council that meets for 16 hours a day, Mayor, Doesn't have to take a small portion of that to worry about transportation infrastructure. You can keep a body that's focused on mobility just doing that. And my recommendation, regardless, would be to leave the situation as it is. Have the Regional Mobility Authority over there acting under the auspices of the city because you're specializing. So here's again, and then any questions that you might want. Because we don't know exactly what the answer is until you ask. I have talked to the current chairman of the Texas Transportation Commission. I've talked to the other 4 commissioners. I've talked to the current executive director, the interim executive director, and next week we believe there'll be a new executive director. My counterparts that help write laws in the Senate know where I'm going with this. Me being chairman of transportation, and the bills that I have filed and will file are going to be ones that support communities making decisions. Because of some of the actions here in El Paso, we have changed law based on El Paso. Policies are being changed at TxDOT because of El Paso. We're trying to allow a red emergency button on the wall to be pressed by a staff person who's told to do things that are unethical. I'm not saying you've done anything like that. This has got so many tentacles out there. And if we were in San Antonio, for instance, right now, or if we were in Dallas, there would be thousands of people behind me with petitions to take this away. Here in El Paso, it's something that people aren't even aware of. We have a new term in the legislature called toll fatigue. North Texas has elected 2 new positions in the legislature based on one issue. We're running to oppose tolls. And that's how they got elected, in the legislature. And we have so many issues that we discuss, but that's how big a deal it is in the rest of Texas. Do I think all tolls will go away the next few years? No. And one of the reasons they're not going to go away is going back to that original heavy-handedness. We didn't do this collectively as a state. We divided and conquered. We said create a regional mobility authority. Start doing tolls and you get to keep the money. Because every community, believe it or not, feels the same way as El Paso. I'm going to be speaking at a group in Houston, Texas on Friday. You know what they're going to tell me in Houston? Chairman Pickett, we need your help. We don't get our fair share of our transportation dollars. I guarantee you I'm going to hear that. I hear it every single place I go in the state of Texas. Dallas is screaming right now on, we're working behind the scenes, the select committee that I have, we're going to be making recommendations on the division of the Prop 7 money. Dallas community's already intervened and said, we don't think you're going to do this to where we get our fair share of the money. There's one project in North Texas, one project itself is $3.5 billion. And Prop 7 is going to bring in $3 billion a year. They want the whole thing. So there's no one initiative that'll fix all of the answers out there, but it's a different time. It wasn't all TxDOT's fault. TxDOT pushed heavy, too far though. I think this is one of those times where you gave a subordinate, because the legislature, we're the bosses. We gave our subordinate some messages. The message is, we're not giving you cash, but we'll let you borrow money. Okay. So the more borrowed money, the better. So if we create tools that force communities to go out and borrow money, then that's going to be okay, was their assumption. And we went too far. Now we're trying to pull that back. And the legislature has stepped up, and it took a long time. I've been pushing for years. I told a story right before I got here. Prop 1 in 2013, it was not easy. That was the toughest piece of legislation that I've had in my 21 years in legislature. It took 1 regular, 3 special sessions, and 8 different attempts to get 100 votes because of being a constitutional amendment to get it passed. 8 attempts, 3 special sessions, and a regular session. When it did pass and went to the public, though, the public overwhelmingly, 80% in 2014, said this is what we want. So when we got back to the legislature this year in 2015, my counterpart in the Senate, the members were basically saying, what have you got for us next? Because we see what the public wants. 80% is what Prop 1 passed. Prop 7 passed 84%. The governor himself is self-deprecating. He goes around the state saying, Prop 1 got more votes than I did running for governor. And it's part of his initiative. So I'm not asking you to lose anything. I'm asking you to give back to El Paso. I'm asking you to turn all the 3 lanes into helping our mobility, not tolling them as long as TxDOT steps up and says, yes, it's a state highway. We now have the money coming in for the future. We will take over the responsibility of the maintenance into perpetuity. And I apologize, Mr. Chairman, for being long-winded. And now I'd like to open up for any questions. It doesn't have to be on transportation.
You open the door. Members of the board?
I do have a question.
Representative Niemer?
And as the baby of the board, this is something I'm sure that perhaps other board members are well familiar with, but the tolls are being pledged against debt.
Mm-hmm.
And what I'm unclear on is what are you suggesting? The debt's to the state. What happens to that?
We, the state of Texas, have already taken care of that. And there's a lot of props here. The debt statewide is the Mobility Fund, Prop 12, Prop 14. So not local communities, but the state of Texas went out and borrowed money and then just put it in the bank account. We put it in our transportation bank account and said, where does the money need to go? And the money went out. And the money went out into toll projects, into non-toll projects. The state just put it wherever they felt it was needed. But as far as local debt, HECTRA, Houston, NTTA, Dallas, when they initiated a toll, their deal was, how much is it going to cost to build a road from A to B? The cost is $1 billion. Okay, we're going to plan it as a toll. That area went out and borrowed the $1 billion and pledged the revenues against it. That's not the situation in El Paso. That's why this has so many people just shaking their heads around the state of Texas going, there was no money borrowed and the tolls pledged against that money to pay it back? No, we were given the money. We were given the money to build the road. So the tolls that are being collected by the Regional Mobility Authority are for your use, for future maintenance, and if there's additional monies above the need for maintenance, you can do other projects with. And that was the selling point to communities around the state of Texas trying to create regional mobility authorities, is you have a tool now to collect money, but it was always going to be based on issuing debt. There's no local RMA, City of El Paso, County of El Paso debt that needs to be paid off that is pledged by your toll revenues. The only agreement was we will use those tolls to pay for maintenance, because TxDOT said, but the future maintenance we're not going to do. We, the state of Texas, aren't going to maintain Cesar Chavez, Loop 375. You're going to have to do that out of your tolls. And so what I'm saying is, state of Texas, you forced us into this. Things have changed. You should pay for the maintenance into the future. And we should not be tolling 6% of the driving public, and let us help with our mobility and congestion. And it's going to become more and more important as these bigger projects get going.
I'm curious about the formula that will be used in order to distribute that money. Because I think it's a little funny that Houston and Dallas have said they're not haven't gotten their fair share, where in fact, I think that's been the case here in El Paso. I think we've done very, very well in the last few years, thanks to you and Ted Houghton. But how will those funds be distributed throughout Texas?
Well, the good news is we're not going to let the legislature do it, even though I said we're going to make recommendations. What the legislature has said is there needs to be funding formulas. Back when I was on city council, and even years after that, once a year, we would make a pilgrimage to Austin begging for money. We'd go before the Transportation Commission. And then when I became involved in appropriations and then transportation, we, the state of Texas, told TxDOT, you're going to have funding formulas that are more conducive to what the real world is. And that has been something that the Texas Transportation Commission has adopted as policy. When Prop One, this is 2013, passed. The legislature, we said, we had a working group, House, Senate, here's what we're going to do. TxDOT adopted that. We're doing the same thing for Prop 7. Is everybody going to be happy? No, but there isn't going to be anybody just screaming and hollering and jumping up and down and lighting their hair on fire. It's never going to be perfect, but the system we now have in place really makes a lot of sense. And what we're doing right now is looking at two parts. It's not just the funding formula of how much goes to Houston, how much goes to El Paso, how much goes to El Paso. We're also looking at putting those dollars into the categories. Because in El Paso, we're entitled to monies coming from different categories. We can pull down some from Metro Mobility. We can pull down some from safety. We can pull down some from congestion. Well, then you have a rural area. They don't have the same issues. And so what we're doing right now in the select committee is looking at all of those. We're going to take the total amount of dollars coming in. We're going to look at the formulas and see that they're working well. There's mobility. Is it going for what it's supposed to? Is safety going for what it's supposed to? We're going to feel better about those. And then we're going to recommend how much money goes into each one of those categories. And so you'll have to, it's not a simple divide by whatever in population, because frankly, that wouldn't work. And it's always going to be a work in progress, what it needs to be. And we need to keep it out of the legislature as well, because we meet every other year. TxDOT meets every month. They can make changes or recommendations, just as a couple of years ago, the energy sector roads, it just came out of nowhere to a lot of us. It was like, there's no category for this. And we wound up having to put some extra monies in there to take care of it. Now, El Paso City and County doesn't get this, but El Paso TxDOT District does get some energy sector money. Because Bob Bielik and his crew actually go a little further than El Paso County, and so that's all figured in. So to answer your question again directly is, we're going to have a moving target that's working pretty well today. And I still strongly believe in giving TxDOT some flexibility too. Let's say that the RMA comes up with a project that's $8 million. Take it to the MPO, and the MPO says, that's a pretty good project. We're looking at the different balances. We take from mobility, we take from here. We can only see where we can get $7.1 million out of this whole deal. Sorry, we can't do the $8 million even with your match. That would be an opportunity for the RMA through the MPO to go to TxDOT and say, we've got a really good project. What do you think? So we're always going to leave some flexibility for funds coming, because we also created a category for the commission to be able to do those kinds of decisions also. So it's working pretty well. We will be making some tweaks. And you have to remember now that since Prop 1, Prop 7 cannot be used for tolls, you are looking at major communities like Houston and Dallas are going, but a lot of our TIP, our Transportation Improvement Program, is tolls. Sorry, you can't use this money for those. So it actually has helped other areas, because in the past, all of those projects were included in all those funding formulas. It didn't matter if it was a toll project or not. And so those did suck out more money. So what's actually going to happen in the future is we're going to do pretty well, because the money that we're drawing from can only be spent on non-tolled projects, which takes those mega ones out of the mix. And so it brings us a higher percentage of dollars. And that's the theme. We had to include that in there, and the people in North Texas and Houston supported it. This was unusual this last session. Out of a total 150 House members and 31 senators, one dissenting vote. One. That's almost unusual. I mean, it's and I told you how earlier it took me 8 attempts to get 100 votes the first time. But we got a lot of converts since 2013 when they saw the way that we were able to dole out the money.
Representative Pickett, since you're on that vein of discussion right now. We have been addressing the tolls on the border highway, but the border highway west extension, which we have already been funded, is proposed also as a toll road.
Yep.
So where are we going here? Are you requesting that we remove the RMA approach TxDOT to remove all tolls?
Yes, but that's not the proposal today.
Okay.
And to answer Mr. Niemer's question, in anticipation, there has been no borrowed funds by the RMA to do the border highway extension west. That money's sitting in your bank account, which has caused me and lots of other people lots of problems. It's never been done in the history of Texas. The money's sitting there. You guys have the cash. It's there. It's yours to spend. But that's the second part. I want to do this with no guarantee of what happens on the other part. And that's a very, very complicated process. And we're going to change laws because of that. There are some problems in the financing of that project that are not helpful to our community. It's not helpful to our community or the state of Texas. TxDOT did some things to push that project that has really, I've got the Attorney General's office involved. I've got TxDOT's legal counsel involved. There are some things because of that that we, the state of Texas, are going to be mindful about not doing in the future again. We're not in a very good situation financially for the state of Texas the way that was put together. And had nothing to do with the RMA. The RMA and your executive director did nothing. That is a problem. You did nothing. TxDOT did some things that could hurt statewide in that process that we're looking at. The bonds that the state issued were tax-exempt bonds. And the state of Texas issued bonds, and some of the IRS laws say you've got to let those contracts within 5 years. And TxDOT sat on the money and originally was going to put it in different projects around the state of Texas and then just wound up dumping it one place so that we didn't get whacked by a $178 million fine by the IRS. But that's for another day. And that high finance, I don't understand, but I do. But today it's asking you to give El Pasoans what they deserve. There's no debt that must be pledged with the tolls. It's not necessary. And if the state of Texas says you're right and we'll pick up the maintenance in perpetuity and put this on the district and Bob Bielick's list. I know Bob is always complaining about the amount of money he gets for maintenance, but we're working on that as well. You've got a nice road, a good road. Let everybody use all 3 lanes. And then there's the small things that bother lots of us. It's very difficult for you to collect from somebody who doesn't have a Texas license plate. Not impossible, but very, very difficult. And you can make all kinds of proposals. I know that your RMA is working with other RMAs to do what's called the back office. But big entities like NTTA and Hectra, they have horrible issues, and they're huge. We can't collect from somebody from Mexico. It's almost impossible. And because everything is automated, what do? We have a bad actor. You don't have a toll booth. We're not going to send a police officer out there to try to wait for a certain license plate. It's just never going to happen. It's just not fair to our community that if I have a out-of-state or out-of-country license plate, it's going to be almost impossible to ever collect from me. I mean, you could read a report once a month on who owes us all this money, and I don't know if Mr. Tejas has that. To me, it really doesn't matter. You're not going to collect it. It's just not going to happen, and it's going to exponentially grow. And if I could go back 15 years, because it's more than 15 years, I wouldn't have done any of this. And toll projects would be something that was initiated by the entire state of Texas. And lots of other states have tolls. And I do get some hate mail on my proposals too, by the way. I have a guy that's after me because on our hearings we're talking about statewide initiatives. And I got even calls that said, I don't want you to take that toll off of 130 in Central Texas because no one's on it but me. I love it. So he's actually giving my argument, and I have a proposal to end that, and we're working. I don't know if I'm going to get the support from the governor's office and speaker and lieutenant governor, but we found a way to remove the toll off segments 1 through 4 on 130, and we're talking $5 billion debt, and we have a plan. If the leadership wants to go for it, if you've ever driven 35, it's the most congested interstate in the state of Texas. But I digress a little bit, but trying to show as an example that this is a movement across the state of Texas. I mean, if San Antonio is successful going to the commission, getting to take a first phase of $380 million off of their plan as a toll, and the second phase is $400 million, it's no longer a toll project. What we're basically asking for, and I mean for you to do this as well, forgive the amount of money, ask TxDOT to forgive the amount of money that they've advanced us to do the toll operations. That must be part of it too. So what have you got to lose? TxDOT, will you forgive the amount that you advanced us, and will you take the maintenance? And so there's got to be this back and forth. TxDOT's been waiting, believe it or not, to hear from our community and are ready to start negotiating. I can't tell you exactly what the commission will do, but we don't even have anything to put before them yet. And so what I'd be asking you to do is to sit down and to allow your executive director to negotiate with TxDOT favorable terms to us that make sense to the state to present to the Texas Transportation Commission.
Mr. Parker, you have a question?
Representative Pickett, thank you for coming. I'm a little slow sometimes, so your enlightenment is really helpful. One of the things I reviewed prior to this was the director of TxDOT's letter to you of March 31st of this year. And in that, it mentions that there's a $5.5, almost $5.6 million loan that would be required to be repaid by the RMA
Yes, sir.
to TxDOT should we terminate this. Now, the TxDOT has the ability to forgive that debt.
Which is alluded to.
Yes, yes. But my concern is I'd sure hate to be stuck with that $5.7 or $8 million.
And here's where, let me do what I do. Make that part of your recommendation. Because I would suggest from your point of view, sitting there, who are representing the community, but you're the body for the Regional Mobility Authority. You don't want to hurt your own bank account. So my recommendation, Mr. Parker, is to say we wouldn't consider it unless you forgive that. And let me work on that on my end.
I'm all for that. I'm just curious if you have any thoughts that you could share as to the likelihood that might occur.
Let's see. Representative Pickett passed Prop 7. He helped pass Prop 1. He's chairing transportation currently. He's chairing a select committee on transportation finance. I would give it a shot.
Okay.
I would give it an outside shot.
Okay. Thank you for that. I have one other question, too, because there is a project that's going to come before this community that is really quite important to our future. I've been led to believe that TxDOT plans a complete renovation of I-10, and driving over it, I can see why they want to do that. That's going to make I-10 a parking lot for us for the next 10 years, I'm afraid. There's nothing to be done about it. However, there are some things that might alleviate it. I know the work that's being done by TxDOT currently will help alleviate that. But there's one other matter. We have a number of vehicles, semis, passenger vehicles and such that pass straight through our community and do not stop. They all contribute to the congestion that we have, and they are going to make that congestion much worse once that I-10 renovation proceeds. There's something called the Northeast Parkway that needs to be put in.
Thank you.
And I'm sure you're familiar that the Northeast Parkway would cut off from the loop that goes around the city and would enable semi-trailers to transit the Franklin Mountains in a safe manner. Right now, an 18-wheeler cannot safely go over Trans Mountain Drive. Or if they try it, I would not like to be around them when they do it. However, as it's envisioned, the Northeast Parkway would transit Anthony Gap and absolutely provide them access in almost any weather that we experience here. My question is all of the things that you have told us, what is the likelihood of our being able to find the funding to proceed with that is very important to our community and would provide a further reliever once we turn into a parking lot?
Okay, all of these are actually connected. The Northeast Parkway, TxDOT has recommended, currently that was another proposed toll. That is not what TxDOT wants today. TxDOT is designing that as a non-tolled road. Mr. Bielik and I had this conversation just very, very recently. Our community needs to elevate the importance of that. At one time, that was more important than any project. There was a period there where the Northeast Parkway was elevated. That was another one that was proposed to be done as just a toll so that TxDOT would leave us alone, but it didn't show the numbers at that time. And you actually have a couple of scenarios there. You also mentioned the congestion that we're originally going to have to tear up Interstate 10. It's not so much us asking TxDOT to forgive $6 million. I pretty much could guarantee to you and our community that when Interstate 10 does become TxDOT's focus here, TxDOT's going to want to go to the RMA if you don't have the toll removed from Cesar Chavez asking for a temporary suspension. Same thing with the Border Highway West. The plans are not to do anything on Interstate 10 majorly until that whole project is completed, because today if we have a problem we couldn't get around it. So the plan is not to do major on Interstate 10 until Border Highway West is completed. So that's going to be done. So now TxDOT wants to attack Interstate 10. How do we do that and get the public's support to move them off of that? It would be to offer, and TxDOT would be coming back to the RMA even if it was to figure out what the toll dollars are. A simple example of that is I've been pushing you all to not charge our veterans. This is the only toll that's TxDOT related that charges veterans a fee. And we can pay that. What TxDOT does on the other toll roads is they ask for an appropriations, and so they pay their back office. So what I'm saying, Les, is when we go to TxDOT to say, would you take the toll off Cesar Chavez and forgive the $6 million, one of the reasons we think you ought to forgive the $6 million is it's going to be a benefit to TxDOT and the driving public to have a roadway where there is no tolls in the future to work on Interstate 10. And Northeast Parkway needs to be elevated in its importance in this community so we can get some of the trucks off of whether it's Interstate 10 or Loop 375. And I told Bob that I would be committed to raising that importance level and get it back on a front burner. And New Mexico hasn't been as excited about it as us, and frankly, we've let that kind of be the reason we haven't moved forward, and we don't need to. Forget it. And New Mexico's been great partners, and they're part of our MPO, but they don't see as important, so we can still move forward. In fact, we're talking about what's called a Super 2, and that's what's being designed right now. And Mr. Bielik, I'm going to support him. He's asked TxDOT to start implementing the right-of-way acquisition, got a little pushback because TxDOT Austin says, I don't see where you're getting a commitment from El Paso. I've already told them, now that Mr. Bielik has brought it to your attention, it's now an important project for me. So it's all tied together. And our city deserves to have a complete loop around this town without paying a toll. But today, one step. So we're not going with hat in hand or begging. This is going to be a partnership. And I planned on bringing up the reason we're asking you to forgive is you're going to need us. You're going to need the RMA in the future to help with the Interstate 10 expansion. I believe that's the case. And again, we're at a perfect timing. You've got a new chairman of transportation who has nothing to do with construction and people. He's a former judge who is wanting to reduce tolls. He's even made that public statement a few months ago. We need to pull back. You've got a governor who said that and ran on it. He did a commercial with him on the side of the road with cars passing him in his wheelchair. You've got a lieutenant governor who said that. You've got a speaker who said that in his own district pushed for a toll being removed. You've got a legislature that said, hey, we were asleep at the wheel for years. We didn't realize that when we weren't giving TxDOT cash and we said go ahead and borrow that they were getting us into this debt. We want to stop that. So we've stopped the debt and we've given you cash. It's a perfect storm. If we're crazy not to ask because it's being done all over the state of Texas. Are re-looking at their plans. And if the second largest city in Texas does not have a single toll road, why can't we? But we got to ask.
Are there any other questions from members of the board?
And we'll double your salaries. Oh, you don't get a salary. I'm sorry.
Mayor Leeser, would you like the opportunity to address the board on this issue related to Representative Pickett's discussion?
You must have been able to read my mind because I did have a question.
Thank you, Mayor Leeser.
Thank you, Chairman Morty. And my biggest question was, and I think you alluded to the question about the Border Highway West and being able to remove the toll, but there's a lot of debt allocated to, and the debt was allocated based on a toll highway. So what I'm concerned is that if the state of Texas allocates money based on a certain criteria, if we remove that criteria, which is a toll road, will we be responsible for the debt or have to pay back the debt because we did not fulfill the agreement which the money was allocated to? And that's something that I think we need to have a commitment from Chairman Pickett, the state, that's saying that if we do remove it prior to construction, we're not required to pay back that money.
The answer to the mayor's question is like the first one. There is no debt to pay back. The only expense would be future maintenance. So it's not asking to forgive any debt. In fact, the money's here.
Yeah, no, that wasn't the question. The question is, I understand there's no debt, but it was allocated based on specifics. If we don't fill the specifics, will we be required to give the money back because we didn't fulfill the specifics?
And my answer would be no, because we would ask the same way.
I just want to make
It
sure
would
that's
not
in there.
go against any of our dollar allotments, but the bigger question still would be for TxDOT to analyze is the maintenance cost. Because the Border Highway Extension West is the same as the current Cesar Chavez, is you're collecting tolls and you can use those tolls for maintenance in the future if there's any money above maintenance for other projects, so going to maintenance. The good news is we're talking about a source of money that's twice as much as construction. If we were asking for construction money, you've got a pot of money this big. If you're asking money for maintenance, you're asking from a pot of money this big. So it's in our best interest to attack the maintenance and ask them to forgive anything. And again, I wouldn't say moving forward unless all those guarantees were there. But we can't make that decision until we ask the question. So part one, part two would be the same. And we may not be able to do part two. It may not happen. And again, one of the reasons is because of the financing, unless there is a way for the tax exempt bonds that the state issued, if we can take care of that. And so that would be the first thing that even TxDOT would come back to. They'd have to say, I don't know. Mayor Leeser, I don't know Representative Pickett, we need to do the financing first. Let us see if that's possible. So they would have to do that internally, and then the first comment come back is, we found a way to technically do it. Now what's your second question? Our question is, could we remove the tolls off the Border Highway West, and will you take over maintenance into perpetuity? Can that be done? But not until the technical questions have been asked first could we even do that. There is a savings too, and TxDOT is coming up with the numbers, and it's not too late. There are savings to be had on the Border Highway West extension if it was to be a non-tolled road. So there are monies that TxDOT would be able to put in the mix, and we would be able to put in the mix as negotiation as well. It would not take the full amount of money that's been allocated today. So TxDOT looks at a huge, big picture with cash flow projections. They're just looking, because everybody sends in their bills. They just want to pay all the bills. And when we're able to say we have additional cash because it's not going to cost as much, that's a selling point on our side as well. But one step at a time. And again, it'd have to be, Mayor, it'd have to be an agreement with the city, the RMA, and TxDOT before we would go forward. And I know that the mayor and I have talked about it, and I know you wouldn't agree to that until you got everything we felt comfortable with as a community.
And I have talked with Chairman Pickett, and it is important. I told him, I said, I'm in favor of being able to move the city in a better way and continue to move our transportation, our highways. When we go talk to other companies around the country, one of the biggest things when they come to talk about whether they want to relocate to El Paso or even consider doing business is the means of transportation, the ease of movement. Because Chairman Wardy, you know that being in the trucking business, time is money, and they really come to us and say, how can you continue to help us make sure we can move our goods and move our goods through in a rapid manner? So you're right, to be able to open up all the highways and continue to move freight and continue to move El Paso in a rapid way is very important. I do support you, but I support it in a way, just as you stated, that the city of El Paso is not held with any debt, and that there is no debt forthcoming, and that there is there is no sunset time where the maintenance, and all of a sudden 15, 20 years from now, they come back and say, okay, you know what, we've done it, but now we want to give you back these roads, and we want you to have these roads and have maintenance moving forward. That would not be proper. So I think we got to look at all those things, and I think, Mr. Tejas, when you do talk to TxDOT and you do kind of try to come up with a deal, it becomes an indefinite project for the state to take over these roads and continue to maintain them in a proper way.
And I think having an executive director of the RMA with a doctor of jurisprudence probably helps to some degree, quite a bit, even though there'll be other counsel taken in that. And it's interesting, and I'll ask TxDOT to get some latest numbers, Les especially. It's funny, and these numbers are examples are a little bit old, but a few years ago at Interstate 10 and New Mexico border, it was around 84,000 vehicles a day. At Interstate 10 out at Hudspeth County, it was around 82,000 vehicles a day. At Bassett Center at Interstate 10, 240,000 cars a day, or vehicles a day. So the issue really isn't so much the trucks going through. We want them off. It's safer. Let's get the trucks off. But it's us. We're the benefactors of Interstate 10. And if Interstate 10 gets shut down, it's not the trucking companies going from Los Angeles to Florida that hurt that much. It's us. We need the relief. We need to have the border highway. We need to have as many lanes open as possible for us. And I'll get those numbers because it'll be interesting. There's going to be a lot of questions that people think about coming from different angles. But at this point, I think it's really, really simple. And this, to me, is the test balloon. If we can get the Texas Transportation Commission to agree to the terms that are beneficial to the city of El Paso and to the RMA, we ought to go for it, only if it's beneficial to us. And that would take a stamp of approval by the city of El Paso and the RMA, only if you think it's beneficial. And
I agree with you, and I thank you, and I thank the board for the opportunity to approach the board and kind of voice some of my concerns. And I thank you, all of you all, for serving on this board, and welcome Dr. Niemer. And I thank you all again, and I do support you as long as it benefits the city and there's no debt, that all the debt is taken care of by the city. So thank you.
Representative Pickett, thank you for, I think it was very helpful because we have some new members to put the historical perspective. And before we have our little discussion on this, on behalf of the board, we want to thank you for your service to our community, especially on the transportation side. I think many of El Pasoans aren't aware of how much work you have done from your side, the legislative process, to help mobility in our community. So we owe you a debt of gratitude, and we appreciate it.
Thank you, Chairman, and I appreciate, again, your history. You were serving in the position of mayor of El Paso when a lot of us, so you have a perspective and know that times have changed and how the desperation at that time is changed. It's no longer the same. So it's a different time. Let's take advantage of it.
Thank you very much. Well, members of the board, if you don't ask, you don't get an answer. So I think the next step, if we choose to take it, is for a motion to be made. And the motion would read something like to direct the CRRMA Vice Chair and staff to meet with Texas Department of Transportation to discuss Representative Pickett's request to remove tolls from the Cesar Chavez Border Highway Managed Lanes project and the associated implications for the CRRMA system.
I'll make that motion.
I'll second.
We have a motion and a second. Is there any further discussion from members of the board, members of the public? If not, all in favor?
Aye.
Any against? Motion passes. Mr. Tejas, I think we would probably need to prepare ourselves and contact TxDOT so that we can craft a letter on the preliminary what we need to address in this issue. And I think a face-to-face meeting would probably be in our best interest to present the letter to them.
Yes, sir. I'll get to work. One comment, though, throughout that entire discussion that I need to correct. And that is that the Cesar Chavez Express toll lanes, we do have a veteran waiver program now.
Right.
So that's an important point that I want to make.
Thank you.
I have the privilege to come back up and say thank you, and I was aware of that, and I should have given you those kudos for when you did that. It just took longer than I expected, but thank you very much on behalf of the veterans out there. Our former county tax assessor collector was probably one of the highest ones that held it. Thank you for taking that action on behalf of our veterans. They get it everywhere else, so we appreciate you stepping up to the. Thank you.
Well, Representative Pickett, we thank you for your time today because it was very helpful. Mayor Lisa, thank you for taking the time to come and address the city's concerns. We appreciate it. So here we go. So we'll report our success or any status of this as we go forward to the board and to you, Representative Pickett, and to Mayor Lisa for the council. Thank you. Okay. Next item on the agenda is item 5, discussion and action on a board resolution authorizing the executive director to execute work authorization number 29 with Atkins North America as the CRRMA's general engineering consultant to study and define equipment upgrades, vendor requirements, and business rules that would be required to create a consolidated back office. Mr. Tejas.
Yes, sir. Good morning. Raymond Tejas, Executive Director of the Camino Real RMA. So what you have before you as item number 5 then is, as was read into the record, it deals specifically with the back office, which was alluded to in the last item, but in very general terms, the back office really is how transactions are processed by the Regional Mobility Authority in particular. But going back, so the question is one that relates to a consolidated back office approach. So before I get into that, let me go back in time a little bit. Several years back, in partnership with the City of El Paso, the Regional Mobility Authority actually used some TxDOT funds that were available through the Chavez Express Toll Lane project to develop an operational study of in essence, the back office for the City of El Paso's international bridges. So at that point, we were looking at the operations of how the transactions work, not only the pedestrian, but the vehicle, the automated vehicle, the tag transactions, and really looking at the entire scope of how the International Bridge Division operated. Included in that study was a look at the potential for, or a consideration of, consolidated back office. Which that really means is there a way to link the operations, the back office operations of the City of El Paso's bridges with the back office operations of the Regional Mobility Authority with its toll roads that are coming online at that time. So what you see then before you today is a work authorization with our general engineering consultant, and in fact, actually, by way of background for our new members, we, as we've discussed, we employ a general engineering consultant, which in essence serves as our engineering department. The way that we issue work authorizations or pursue new projects is through individual work authorizations. So this new work authorization, number 29, then continues the work that began under the operational study of the international bridges and looks at, through 2 phases, looks at the potential of consolidating back office services with bridges. So phase 1 then, we would look to update the original operational study and define a desired state. Then if we were looking forward to phase 2, at that point then phase 2 would develop all of the requirements. So that's all of the specs, all of the documents that you would need to authorize our either go of one of 2 different ways. We could utilize our systems integrator that's on board now if they were capable to handle this sort of a consolidated back office. Otherwise, at that point, we would then begin a procurement for an entity that would handle that back office development. So we're looking at about a 9-month schedule, and we have a not-to-exceed amount of $446,623. And again, these are funds that were allocated by TxDOT through the Cesar Chavez Express toll lanes project, very similar to it's actually the exact same funding source that we used for the operational study. So subject to your questions, I would recommend approval of this item, and of course, we have a representative from our general engineering consultant here should you have any technical questions as well.
Questions? Mr. Fernandez?
Yeah, how long was the original contract or term? You said the new one's going to be about 9 more months?
That's right. So the way that it works is that we have one master agreement with the general engineering consultant, and usually it's if I remember correctly, it's a 3 to 5 year term. We had one originally back in, I want to say 2009, that expired in 14. We re-procured our general engineering consultant and executed that agreement, that again a master agreement last year. So we've got another 3 to 5 years under that master agreement. Then the individual work authorizations are then project specific. So those terms are related only to that particular project. In this case, work authorization number 29 is estimated to be a 9-month phase.
Mr. Parker?
Mr. Tejas, what happens to this study if the tolls do indeed go away within the next 6 months?
That was going to be my question, Mr. Parker.
Good question. So 2 things. Let's start with Chavez. If Chavez goes away, Border West Expressway is still anticipated to be a toll, so we'd still operate as a back office. However, if Border West Expressway went away, there are still operational benefits to having a singular back office. There are certain improvements that would be made at the City of El Paso's international bridges through this program that would still be a benefit to the region. So there's still value, even if in the long term the RMA operated as a non-toll entity, there would still definitely be benefits to the region, specifically through the bridge operations.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, sir.
You know, there were a lot of studies in the past for members of the board that the automation, there's tremendous strides to be made on automation of the ports of entry and the collection of tolls, and it allows the city a lot of flexibility on demand pricing and a number of other things that they're really not capable of performing at the current time. So in the interest of creating an expedited transportation network, I think it merits us going forward, because if we don't do this, nobody else is going to do this.
Right.
And this is one of those things where strategically I think it makes a lot of sense for us to take a very hard look at what's required to do this, and then make the necessary recommendations and lobby the other governmental entities that are involved with us, the county and the city, and TxDOT to participate. Would I be correct, Mr. Tejas?
Absolutely. So, and playing off of those comments, the City of El Paso has been a very interested partner. The Bridge Division Director was here earlier. I'm not sure if he's still here.
He's
but
right behind you.
They're an active participant in this. So it's important to note that, because whenever the Regional Mobility Authority is talking about another agency's facilities, we have to point out we're doing this in partnership. This isn't the RMA deciding that it's a good idea. This is the RMA in partnership with the City of El Paso, just as we did with the operational study several years back. This is a continuation of that partnership. And this leads directly into what we've already, as you all know, we've already partnered with the County of El Paso in terms of their Tornillo Guadalupe port of entry as well. So it makes a lot of sense linking these facilities, because they're all doing the same thing.
Any additional questions? I'll entertain a motion to approve.
So moved.
Second.
Is there any further discussion? There being none, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any against? Motion passes. Thank you. Item 6, presentation, discussion, and action on the CRRMA board resolutions authorizing the following actions as they relate to the El Paso streetcar project. A, that the vice chair execute an interlocal agreement for project contributions with the City of El Paso related to the Central Business District Phase 4 project. And B, that the executive director execute work authorization number 26 with Atkins North America Incorporated as the CRRMA's general engineering consultant for the provision of construction management services. And item C, that the executive director execute a third amendment of an assigned agreement for the professional services with AECom, formerly known as URS Corporation, for the provision of various construction phase services. Mr. Tejas.
All right, thank you. That was a lot, but there's several things going on, and I think for the benefit of our newer members and also the public, as always, I put together a PowerPoint that hopefully will provide a lot of the detail for this one that could be useful. So we're going to be talking about the project update. In fact, actually, I should explain this presentation was actually provided to the City Council back on November 10th by myself and the chair. So I've tweaked it a little bit just to make it a little more specific to what we're doing today. So we're going to talk about the status completion timeline, the scope of the project budget, the construction management activities, and the outreach activities as well. So very briefly, and I'll go through this fairly quickly, but feel free to stop me or ask any questions as we go along. As you know, with this particular project, we split it into two separate procurements. One was for the vehicles themselves, so anything housed within or related to the vehicles was one specific procurement, and then the other procurement dealt with the infrastructure component. Brookville Equipment Corporation won the procurement for the vehicles. In fact, as you've likely seen, 3 of those vehicles are already in Pennsylvania being worked on at the Brookville facility. 3 more are being shipped out tomorrow, I believe, if I remember correctly. And then the Paso Norte Track Works is the construction contractor that was awarded the infrastructure component. So infrastructure is inclusive of everything that is not the vehicle. So that's tracks, power stations, overhead lines, stops, any and everything. The maintenance and storage facility is a big component of that as well. Paso Norte Track Works, by way of explanation, is a joint venture between Granite Construction and Railworks Track Systems. And that's the same partnership that developed the Tucson streetcar very recently. Completion timeline then. The project will be complete and full revenue service will be available in late 2018. Full revenue service is a way of saying there will be folks hopping on and off and they will be taking fares at that time. We're talking about 2 loops. And both loops will be available in late 2018. We've actually got a milestone in between that allows for the first 2 vehicles to be delivered and the downtown loop to be open for testing of those 2 vehicles in early to mid 2018, with all the remaining vehicles then coming in a staggered schedule after that, achieving the mid to late 2018 completion. Here's a brief timeline to date. I think the important points that I'll touch on here are that the City of El Paso began this project in May of 2012 when they hired URS engineering firm for preliminary engineering and environmental work. that was when it all began. The idea at that point was that the city of El Paso would complete all of the preliminary engineering and environmental work. They would complete all of the design work, in fact, and TxDOT would bring the construction funds, and at that point the project would be developed. Along those, and you can see some of the dates here. I won't dwell on too many of them, other than let's see. I'm missing that. There was an assignment. There it is. August 13th of 2014. The city council at that time had completed the design work. TxDOT was coming with the funds, and at that time, council assigned the URS agreement for design work to the RMA for completion of the project. And later, 2 months later, in October, TxDOT provided the $97 million, and we merged those, and we're developing the project. And just as a refresher as well, the RMA is tasked with completing that design, which we've done, procuring the entities that would build the project and the facilities, which we're in the process of, and we will complete testing and startup. Once it's operational, we will turn the entire project over to Sun Metro as a mass transit department of the city of El Paso, and our role in this project will be complete. So this is the project. As I mentioned, the 2 loops, and we talked a little bit about that in the past. 27 stops, 4.8 miles of track, a maintenance and storage facility that would be located at the downtown transfer center on Santa Fe. This is a rendering of the maintenance and storage facility that we discussed. All vehicles will start their routes and end their routes at this facility downtown. Here's another look at it. These are the vehicles in their current state. These are President's Conference Committee vehicles, PCC vehicles. And this is what they look like in action. Here's some financial details for you. Professional services, that's one of the areas we're going to be talking about today, $11.5 million. As we discussed, $97 million came from TxDOT. That breaks down as noted there. The infrastructure base bid, we've got $61 million, vehicle remanufactured $20 million. And those are inclusive of contingencies as well. Another area that we ought to talk about is that when we put out the infrastructure procurement, we had base bid number 1, which was all of the infrastructure that we needed to operate the system. Then we had base bids 2, 3, and 4. Base bids 2 and 3 were water utility relocations and improvements that were necessary for water and the wastewater lines. That was done in coordination with the water utility. So that's an additional $4.5 million. And as you all know, I've been before the PSB, Public Service Board of the Water Utility, and they have approved and we have executed the agreement that provides us access to that $4.5 million, and we will be handling that through our infrastructure agreement with Paso Norte Track Works. This other item, base bid 4, deals with the Central Business District 4 project, and that was a project that the city of El Paso has been working on for some time. It's scheduled to be designed and completed, I believe, beginning in 2020, if I remember correctly. However, that project includes certain infrastructure work along Kansas Street from Paisano down to Father Rom, and along Father Rom from Kansas all the way over to Santa Fe. That's important because that's in the limits of our project as well. So as we did with base bids 2 and 3, we did with base bid 4 under the city of El Paso, in coordination with the city of El Paso. We did certain design revisions to our project to account for some of the later work that would be done by the city of El Paso under Central Business District 4. Yesterday, in fact, I was before City Council, and they approved the agreement for Central Business District 4, providing the funds necessary for the RMA's contractor, which again is Paso Norte Track Works, to complete that work. And that item is on our agenda as well. These are this is additional work done by others. The initial design effort that was provided by URS, paid for by the city of El Paso, amounted to about $4.8 million. El Paso Electric has to do overhead and underground relocations and additional work. They've provided estimates right now of overhead in the amount of about $800,000. They are currently in design for the underground work, so we don't have an estimate on that. And Texas Gas has estimated about $1.3 million in relocations and movements. This is all important because this is not part of the $97 million. These are the utilities, those franchise agreements. Those franchise utilities are self-performing, meaning they're doing the work on their own. and the City of El Paso provided the 4.8 for the initial design. So before you, under item 6, you have a couple of agreements. And really what they're doing there are they're solidifying our team during the construction phase. Atkins North America, as we've discussed, is our general engineering consultant. They're the team that we use for as our engineering department, if you will. We are bringing them on board here to serve as the overall project manager. Gil Gardner, who's with us today, will serve as the project manager specifically, but it's the Atkins North America team that will serve as the point for the management of this project. So they'll handle all the construction management activities under the infrastructure component, and they're also handling the outreach component. We're going to talk a little bit about that as well. They have brought on a local group by the name of Barracuda PR. And AECOM is the entity that used to be known as URS. We've kept them on board, and going back, some of the older board members will remember the way that we're approaching this project is really to make more of a hybrid approach to the management of the construction side. AECOM was the engineer of record. They completed all of the design services, so we felt it was important to keep them on board through construction. They will be providing the design services during construction. They're also handling the vehicle remanufacturer oversight, as one of their subs, LTK in particular, is a streetcar. They have streetcar expertise, so we're keeping them on board. So we're really keeping all of the expertise that URS brought through design and keeping them as part of the team as well. They'll handle the integration and operations manuals as well. This is a breakdown of the not to exceed amounts for each of the agreements that you have under item 6. The work authorization, the original work authorization number 26 that we have in place today with Atkins as our general engineering consultant was for pre-construction activities. So we needed to bring them on board so that once the construction entities came on board, that we could all hit the ground running. That has proved to be very useful. So Gil is very familiar with the area and the project already. Those pre-construction activities had a not to exceed amount of $440,000. Now we're moving in. What is being requested of you under item 6 is the construction activities under work authorization number 26.1. That adds $4 million to the work authorizations necessary for the construction management. And it includes all of those activities that we discussed before. AECOM, again, formerly known as URS, the way that that works is that instead of work authorizations, we have the assigned agreement. Again, going back in time, the city entered into an agreement with URS. They assigned those design agreements to the Regional Mobility Authority, and we have since amended that agreement twice, and we're looking for a third amendment today. The first amendment was for what we referred to as the interim scope, and that was really to provide for the city to provide us about $120,000 to not lose steam, in essence, is what we were asking for. At that time, we were asking for the $97 million from TxDOT. We had certain contractual requirements that we had to go through, so there was going to be a gap between when the project was assigned to us and when we had access to the $97 million. So the city agreed to not only assign URS, but also assign $124,659 to us to continue work. That was complete. The second amendment then was once the $97 million became available, URS completed the procurement activities associated with the project. We had a not to exceed amount of $3.25 million for that one. And then the third amendment that you have before you today is for the construction activities that we discussed before, and that also is a not to exceed amount of $3.6 million. So that's how you get to the numbers in the agreements today. Another area I wanted to touch on was the Barracuda PR outreach component. We are planning and have already begun work for a very significant outreach component for this particular project because of the nature of it. I mean, you've got 4.8 miles of track that we'll be putting into the roadways. We're going through very dense areas downtown, near hospitals, near the Haskins Center, near the Convention Center, ballpark. Anything you want to be that you want to avoid on a major construction project, we're going through it, honestly. So we felt that a very rigorous outreach plan was going to be necessary. So as I mentioned, the GEC has brought on Barracuda PR. They have already begun some activities, including going door to door, knocking on doors, developing a stakeholder list of everybody along those 4.8 miles. They'll also, and in fact, yesterday, they've begun weekly stakeholder meetings. These meetings will be held every Wednesday, and that's something that's actually of note. That's pretty unique. A lot of the construction activities that entities have here in the region, they don't hold these weekly stakeholder meetings where anybody who lives on the route, who has a building on the route, who's impacted by this project can come and hear directly from the contractors, directly from the utility entities, and everybody that's involved in this particular project. They can hear what's happening today, and more importantly, a 2-week look ahead. So they'll know what's coming and when, and more importantly, why. So they can brace for it, they can adjust for it, and that sort of thing. Those stakeholder meetings, I should mention, Texas Gas had been holding stakeholder meetings on Tuesdays. We joined with them yesterday, and starting next week, they'll roll into our weekly meetings on Wednesday. So, and of course, the electric company will join us as well. Water utility will be there. Everybody will be there that is involved in this particular project. Email newsletters. The first one went out. I believe you all should have received one on Sunday. So please comment. Let us know what was good, what didn't work. If you need more information, just let us know. That will go out to the entire stakeholder group. We're also developing a website for this particular project. We'll have a social media presence, including Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram. And of course, we'll be doing regular presentations to civic organization and neighborhood groups as the interest arises. I should mention I've done several of them already. Most recently, the Realtors Association last week. Coming up, we've already scheduled one for early next year with the RIM Neighborhood Association. So I anticipate those will be very active in the coming months. This is a holdover from the City of El Paso's presentation as well. I like to add it because it shows how efficient we're being. When you look at streetcar projects, rail projects, you normally will boil it down to a cost per mile. What we did, we had URS look back through some of the more recent streetcar projects, and we compared to similar projects. In this usage, similar is defined as including a maintenance and storage facility and also vehicles in your project. If you look, we went all the way back to 2010, looked at different miles and the cost per mile. When you look across all of these major projects, we are the lowest cost per mile by far in certain instances. So that's a nice little thing to mention. So that's what I have for you on this. So subject to your questions, I'll go through each of them very briefly.
Mr. Tejas, the Barracuda outreach, I don't remember that in our initial discussion. Is that in addition to everything we were doing? Is that something that's new that's come up, or was that planned for all along?
It was always planned for. Actually, the way that it worked is that the original plan was to include it on the construction contractor side. So that's where you may have heard of it. We had it as part of their responsibilities. However, as we were going through the procurement, we thought about it and realized that it made much more sense and only really made sense being on our side. So we removed it from the construction contractor requirement and then added it to the general engineering consultant. And the reason for that is, which seems obvious now, is that we're the ones that are going to get the calls when there are construction activities that are impacting residents and businesses. So we need to be able to control that message, and we need to be able to grant access to the outreach component as quickly as we can. So that was the idea behind it. But it was always planned, yes, sir.
Thank you for clarifying that. Well, I mean, I understand it was planned, but not directly managed by us, but it is going to be managed by us now.
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
Board members, any questions? There's a lot of material flowing back and forth here, so.
So just in summary then, 6A is the item that relates to Central Business District 4. In fact, I would mention this one along with item 7, which deals with Wynn Road. Some of the former older board members will recognize them as they came before the board in October. However, since then, the city, through their legal department, have added certain revisions to it. So it had to come back, and one of the reason it had to come back was that one of the major revisions was, as an interlocal agreement, they have a policy that the mayor signs interlocal governmental agreements. So we had to change the signature blocks from the city manager and myself to the mayor and the vice chair. So that's one of the major revisions. Everything else, the total amount is the same. The payment structure is a little bit different in terms of when we require the payments, but the total amounts remain the same, and everything else is substantially the same. So that is item 6A for Central Business District 4. Item 6B then is the work authorization 26.1 with Atkins to serve as the construction management team. And item 6C then is a third amendment with AECom, formerly known as URS, for their construction phase activities as well.
Mr. Tez, do we need to take as individual items, or can we take them in total?
You can take them together if you'd like.
Before we do that, I wanted to make sure that answer any questions there may be from members of the board. Well, there being no questions, I'll entertain a motion to approve, authorize the following actions as relate to El Paso streetcar project, item 6A, 6B, and 6C.
Move. Second.
We have a motion and a second. That was quick. There being no further discussion, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any against? Okay, the motion passes. Item 7 is discussion and action on a board resolution authorizing the vice chair to execute an interlocal agreement for the development of Wynn Road with the city of El Paso. Mr. Tellez?
This one, as I mentioned, also came before the board last month and was approved. This one had to come back again because the city attorney's office made some tweaks to it again. The only major substantive tweak was that the signatory from the city of El Paso would be the mayor as opposed to the city manager, and that changes the signatory from the RMA as well, from the executive director to the vice chair. So those are the main revisions. I believe everything else substantially remained the same in terms of costs. So subject to your questions, and actually with our new board members, let me know if you'd like me to brief you on the particular project.
Well, this is an instance where, as you're aware, and everybody that follows this, understanding the engineering challenges that the city of El Paso has had, this is where the city manager approached us to ask if we could participate and help them as one of their resources on this project, which falls in line with what we do. So we are participating to help the city of El Paso.
Absolutely.
And to complete the necessary projects in our community so they don't get real behind. So this is I think this is the first of hopefully many in the future where we can demonstrate our capabilities and to handle things efficiently, on time, and according to budget, and because there's a lot to be done in our community. So,
and along those lines, the intent of this project is to provide new ingress and egress for the Zaragoza Port of Entry on a basically new construction on Wynn Road. Why that's important is that there are congestion issues at the Zaragoza Port of Entry as it comes to and leaves from Loop 375 in that area. Why this one in particular makes a lot of sense for the RMA to be involved is that we are developing the Medicus Managed Lanes project, which is in that same area. So we're doing ramp reversals on 375, which don't make sense unless and until Wynn Road is in place as well. So combining these two projects, at least from the same oversight entity, which is in this case the RMA, makes a lot of sense.
there are no questions. I entertain a motion to approve.
So moved.
Second. We have a motion and a second. There being no further discussion, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any against? Motion passes. Item 8, update, discussion, and action on the Executive Director's Report, the 2016 Texas Transportation Forum in Austin, Texas, January 4th through 6th, 2016, and B, election of officers at our January board meeting.
So item 8A is really just an informational item. There is a conference, a transportation conference that is held each year, normally between Austin and San Antonio by TxDOT. In this year, it's in Austin. It's referred to as a transportation forum. Really helpful. It gets all of the transportation folks and entities that are engaged in major transportation projects throughout the state. It gets them all together in one place. What's particularly important, and I'll be attending this year again, but what's really important are the meetings that happen on the side. So by way of example, we're part of the Team Texas organization, which is the organization of all of the tolling entities. We've already scheduled a Team Texas meeting for this. There's a gathering of the RMAs that will be held as well. So a really, really useful conference. So I'll be attending, and I'll brief you afterwards in terms of the actions that occur. Beyond that, then, item 8B relates to the election of officers. I put this on originally as an informational item. Now that we've got some board members appointed, we've got some vacancies filled, I thought it was appropriate that in January we'd bring back the election of officers, which we haven't had in quite some time. However, I realize the bylaws actually require elections of officers in February. So I'm wondering now if we don't just stay in a holding pattern until February and have the elections in February. So I'm thinking that might be a better approach. But I'm open, obviously, to your comments.
Well, first thing, Mr. Tez, on item A, it's not out of the realm for a board member to attend the Texas Transportation Forum with Mr. Tez. I, unfortunately, because of my professional schedule, am not able to attend, so I'm going to extend the offer to any one of our board members that would like to attend with Mr. Tez. I have attended these in the past in a different capacity, and I think they're very useful. There's some good networking and find out how other communities are doing things and approaching issues. And then the election of officers, if our resolutions call for February election, then we ought to probably just go ahead, and hopefully by that time the governor will have appointed a new chair for this board.
True. Okay. I'll hold that until February.
Is there any, I don't believe there's any action that we need to take on either one of these.
No, sir. Informational only.
That completes our agenda today. Is there anything else, Mr. Tez, that?
I don't have anything for you, no, sir.
Okay, that being said, entertain a motion to adjourn today's meeting.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
This meeting is adjourned. Thank you very much.
Could I get the time?
Adjourned at 10:44 a.m.